All right, so for lab 6, this is kind of the first time that we're going to kind of actually go over quite a bit of what we went over in labs 2, 3, and 4. The only difference this time is that you're kind of just expected to do it on your own, and in a lot of cases, that's actually, for many, actually easier. So for some people, you'll actually look forward to that. Um, so, anyways, real quick, I'm gonna kind of brush over some of this stuff because it's fairly simple, and we've actually done it before in many cases. So, anyways, step one is we add a column. We actually add two columns to the rental item table. One is rental item price and one is rental item type. And we actually don't do anything with this right now, but we do in lab 7. So this is kind of a preparatory thing. And you can look and see like the different things here. So rental item type is a foreign key, and it references common lookup in common lookup ID. So you'll have to add you don't add the constraint right now, I don't believe. You'll just add the columns. And let's see. Yep, so you don't worry about the constraints because it says add the two columns to the rental item table. While you will place a not null constraint on the two columns, you can't do that immediately because there are already rows in the table. The alter table statement adds two new columns to the table structure. The contents of the new columns will be empty or null for all existing rows. So essentially, what it's saying there is that we're adding two new columns, and it actually let's take a look. If we were to go look at so if we did select everything from rental item, and we run this, and let's set our line size. Let's make this a little bit better. And then let's rerun that. You'll notice that after you add these two columns, because there's already rows in the table, these are all going to be null because we don't specify a default value, and we're adding two new columns. So those are going to be null for every row anyway. So general practice is that when you're adding a new column, you don't put the constraints on it until after you put the data in those columns, which is exactly what we're going to do. We're just not going to do it yet. We'll do that in lab 7. So that's what it means in step 1, just add the columns. So if you don't know how to do that, you can just Google it. So if I was you, I would say Oracle add column, right? Something like this. And I really like any one of these sites. This Oracle tutorial is pretty good. And something like this. But remember, we're not going to put a constraint on it. So really just be alter table, rental item, add rental item type, and then the data type, which is number. Okay. And then you can actually add two columns at once using this. So just remember no constraints again, and you can add both the columns at the same time. All right, so that is step 1 is actually really easy. Nice short statement there. All right, and step 2 is where you get to build a new table, this time from scratch. So I'm not going to go over this because I kind of want you guys to kind of do it. The only thing I'm going to talk about is this check constraint. So a check constraint is a way that we can add more, I guess, structure to our database, more checks. And that's kind of where the check comes in. So essentially what it's doing is the active flag value has to either be a yes or a no. So when we insert in here, what we're saying is look, when I put a value in here, check to make sure that that value is either a yes or a no, a capital Y or a capital N. And the reason why this is important is because, we are all humans, and in case we accidentally type an I, or maybe the programmer does something, because basically we're going to build a lot of stuff that relies on this only being a Y and an N capitalized, because what if it was lowercase? Because hard-coded strings are case sensitive. So a lowercase yes would not equal the same thing as an uppercase yes. So that's why we put that check constraint there. And again, if you want to see a check constraint, they're actually fairly easy. Let's make sure we're looking at Oracle specific. All right, and so here's your check constraint. So you can do this inline or out of line. So inline, it would be, you know, right there. So check, and then the expression is the yes and the no thing. That's where you would put that in there. So in this case, it would be something along the lines of where's a table here? So it would be something like active flag. And let me pull up the table definition here and make sure that I'm putting the right thing here. So it is a string, I believe, or is it a varchar? Let me pull it up. Just getting the data type so I don't show you wrong and have you guys put it in there. Active flag, it's a varchar 20. All right. And then what I would do is I would put my constraint and then price, let's just say 3 not null. And then, you know, down the line when you get there, I would say constraint. And then the name of the constraint, and it tells you in the table, is yn price, and it's a check constraint. And we check to make sure that active flag is in yes or no. All right, so that's kind of how that would look for that column specifically. So that's where we build the column, and then this is basically our constraint. And the check constraint, our condition, and I'm missing a parenthesis there. Our condition is that active flag is in a list of these variables. So when we use the in operator, we're saying, oh, is the value in this list? And so if it's not a Y or if it's not a no, then that constraint is going to fail, as we have probably seen many times. All right, and that is pretty much that one. So really it's just build a table. It should have everything you need here, the data types and all that kind of stuff. Just remember, if it says integer, they actually mean number. And actually, I made a mistake. This should be a 1. This should be a varchar 1. Because we're only storing one character. I thought that was strange. There we go. All right. And then step 3, we're going to rename a column, which again is fairly easy. Just to show you an example here. And that's not a, anyways, it's, let me show you the manual way. So we say alter table, and in this case, we are altering the item table. So we'll say alter table item, and we'll say rename column item release date to release date. So yeah, not too bad, nice and easy. So that's another free step. Oh, and one thing, when you create your price table, make sure you create the sequence with it. And if you don't remember how to create the sequence, you can always go back to your lab 2. It'll just be create sequence price underscore S1, and then you'll start with 1001. I believe. And it may not say start with 1001, so it doesn't matter too much, but if you want it to be the same numbers as all the others, start with 1001. All right, so we renamed the column, and then we need to insert 3 new DVD releases into the item table. So that's just some basic inserts into item. And we're going to go over the specifics of that real quick. So with those inserts into item, there's a couple of things that we need to do specifically. So insert 3 new DVD releases into the item table. You should insert a value in the release date column so that it will always be less than 31 days during the course. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make it so the release date is not hard coded like what would normally happen with a movie, but we're going to say like the release date is today minus 15. That's usually what I do, is I usually say today minus 15. And David asks, does this lab cover renaming a table column that is a foreign key in another table? So actually it's the same thing. You can rename a column and it's actually not going to be an issue. The way that it works on the back end is it's already connected. So that should all reflect when you name the column. However, if like in this case, when we run our cleanup script, it's going to erase it all and refix it. So yeah, and you know, a lot of there's not too much renaming columns. I think they purposely leave some of these out to kind of just give you an opportunity to rename a column. Most of the time, you won't be renaming columns too much, but it should just reflect across the board. So nothing different there. You just gotta like if we did this, let's say this was a foreign key, this actually is going to reflect all the way across the board. You don't need to do anything special. It will just happen. So that's a good point. So it will not rename the column in the other tables. They will still reflect it. And I mean, we name our columns the same. So like a good example, if I do describe member and describe contact, you'll notice that member ID is the same in both tables. However, if I renamed member ID and member, everything would still work fine. Let's say I called it member underscore lab ID, right? This would still reference it, but no, it's not going to change this column name. It will not change this column name, but ultimately it actually doesn't matter too much as far as how things connect. It will matter when you go to like query out of this table and do all that stuff, but yeah, it doesn't matter that these actually match up. And a good example of that, if we take a look at rental, you'll notice that we have this customer ID, and customer ID actually refers to member ID, I believe. I'd have to look, but I'm pretty positive that customer ID refers to member ID. It's either member ID or contact, but yeah, they don't have to be named the same, but it is general practice to name them the same because then it makes it a lot easier. Is there a way to change names recursively so columns names match across tables? Not that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's some crazy script out there that might do it, but you're going to be editing the data dictionary manually, and that's never encouraged. So I would say no. Yeah, I would say no. And in most cases, like you're going to have repercussions all through your whole software because most of the time, you know, your database is kind of the foundation piece of your software, right? Well, if we rename a column, all of a sudden, all of our software is pretty much going to stop working. So most of the time, you don't really recursively change your database. Most of the time, what happens is you do a massive redesign. And if you're changing a column name, you're going to have to change all your code essentially. So in most cases, it's more like, oh, let me rewrite the database script. We'll spin up everything and we'll try to migrate the data to this new database at that point, rather than actually change the table name, or else you're going to have a major downtime. So yeah, the short answer to that is probably not. Good question though. Okay, so inserting these DVDs or items essentially into here, you're gonna put, because this is kind of going to give you this, and it says that this is what you put as a release date for the column volumes in the item table. So I usually do 15. If you want, you can do -1. Both work fine. Basically, we just want to make sure that it's newer than 31 days old. So you'll notice that if I were to take this and run it in my terminal, so I'm going to just say select, paste that in there from dual, you'll notice that I get the 10th of February, which was yesterday. And the point of that being is that whenever you run your script, your movies are always going to be new, essentially. Because when we go to do prices on like movies and stuff, that'll be important because we have all of our new movies. Because if I did a select, let's say we wanted to see all of the release dates in our item table, and I think, so if we look at all of our release dates and item, you'll notice that none of them are fairly recent. So if we only had these, we would only have old movies and we would never get to test our new movie prices. So we make our movies that we insert in Lab 6 to be always new. That way we have new movie prices to test later on. So when you insert those, make sure you put this as the release date column in the item table. All right, does that make sense to everybody so far? And it should all be stuff we've kind of seen before a little bit. I guess the big question for those, if you have read through the instructions, does this, do they make sense with what discussion we've had around them? Do they make sense just by themselves? I'm going to take silence as yes. Okay. All right. So you can actually use whatever you want. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because what I do a lot of times actually is I actually really enjoy seeing, I say put your 3 favorite movies in there, because it is quite fun when I'm going through making sure that everything worked correctly and giving you guys a grade. It is quite fun to see what your favorite movies are. So yeah, if you want to put your favorite movie there, and we can have a lot of fun with it. Just make sure it's not already in the database, because one of my favorite movies actually is selecting from item. One of my favorite movies is actually Hunt for the Red October. I really enjoy that movie, and it's already in there, which is too bad, but yeah. All right, good question. So that is step B of step 3. So that's 3B. Okay, so step C, this is where we're going to kind of do what we did in lab 4. So we're going to do chained inserts. So you should have a good handle on that, but I'm going to real quick highlight it for you, because you're going to insert the Harry Potter family. And this is post Deathly Hallows. So you're going to, Harry in this universe has married Ginny. and sorry, spoilers. They're like 20 years old. You should have seen it by now. So you're going to do your insert into, because really we're just inserting one family, and it kind of goes over this. So we're going to insert a new member row for the whole Potter family. Then we're going to do contact for Harry, address for Harry, street address for Harry, telephone for Harry, and then we're going to repeat steps 2 through 5 for Ginny. So we're going to do Ginny, 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 Ginny. Then we're going to do steps 2 through 5 for Lily, 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 and done. One thing that gets everybody, okay, make sure that Lily Potter's name is spelled, her middle name is spelled correctly, because her middle name's Luna. So here's your data that you'll put for member. And then here is the data that you'll put for the Potters. Now, make sure that Lily has only one L in her middle name, and make sure she has a middle name, because it actually will be important later. So you're going to insert into member, right? Member for the whole Potter family. Then you're going to do contact 1, Harry Potter. So you'll do his contact, address, street address, and telephone. So what I would do if I were you is I would do my insert into member, and then I would write my insert into for Harry Potter all the way through telephone. And I would put, some comments in there like this. And then what I would do is I would just take all my code, all my comments, and then I would take and just paste those again, and then just change some of the stuff. Because really you're not going to have to change much. It's going to be actually fairly easy. And Lily, Luna Potter, and you'll do that. So yeah, really you only have to kind of work 1.5 times for this whole bit there. All right. So there's our I would not use the create. What do you mean by create member process? Are you talking about that procedure that you did? I actually wouldn't use the procedure at all. I would actually just write this all out for this one, because the reason being is I believe in the procedure we made actually did individual members, so it didn't tie them to their it wouldn't tie multiple people to a membership. So I would just do these by hand, and there's actually only 3 of them, so it should be fairly quick. Good question though, because technically, if you wanted to, I guess, if you really wanted to deep dive, you could build yeah, and the group accounts will be a good indicator. On these, most of the time, what I have students do is just write them out. Just one insert, because it's just one insert here for all of them, and then for each contact, you're going to do 4 insert statements, which is pretty menial. And the nice thing is, if you're using your sequences and you do it this way, because remember, like on contact, you'll do on all of these, you'll use the member s1 dot next val for member, and then you'll use the cur val for the contact ID. So on, or sorry, I did that backwards. You'll do cur val on member ID to tie it to the existing one. So that will be the same for all of them. And then next val will be the same for all the new primary keys. And so what's nice is you can do a lot of that tie in that way when you do it this way, versus the other way around. So, but yeah, group accounts will have a good starting point for you if you need it. All right. Good questions. Good suggestions. So there's that. We get all the potters, and then we're going to add a rental for them. And there is another little catch here that you need to make sure you do. So here's the important paragraph here. Harry Potter renting 2 rentals for a 1-day rental period. And here's the important part. 1 new release. So this is one of the movies you put in, and 1 old release. Okay, so Harry Potter's going to rent 2. 1 new, 1 old. So you're going to choose one of your movies and one of the existing movies. Ginny Potter will rent 1 new movie for 3 days, and Lily Luna Potter will rent one for 1 new movie for a 5-day rental period. And the reason why we're doing like all these different combinations is so we can test all the different scenarios of our database. For example, we have a 1-day, 3-day, and a 5-day rental. And then we also have new and old movies. So we can test those prices. All right, and that's talking, this right here is just talking about our primary key, foreign key stuff, use the next val, curval like we've done. And it says here you should avoid entering literal values for primary and foreign key values. That means that for something like, if we describe rental on, let's see, meant item. On item, for item type, make sure you're using a subquery to find the stuff. So what I would do is I would say select everything from common lookup, because we don't, and this is kind of how I write my subqueries, is I actually pull the data, then use that query to put in my insert statement. So I'd say select everything from common lookup where common lookup context is equal to item. And this will give us a good starting point. Oh, and apparently, because I've already renamed mine, sorry. So yours will say common lookup context. We actually, in the next step, we actually rename that to table. And then here we can look up the different stuff. So here's all of our item types. So, in here I would probably say where common lookup table is equal to item and common lookup column is equal to item type. That way it's exhaustive. We know we're getting only those rows. And then I can narrow that down to what I need. So then let's say where and common lookup type is equal to Blu-ray. You can make all yours Blu-ray if you want. And the key is that you want 1 row, right? You want 1 row, and that's exactly what we have here. We have 1 row. So we know our query is good. Now, the only thing is instead of selecting all the data out of that row, we only want one thing, and that is our common lookup ID. And then when we get one value only, then we know that our query is ready, and we know that it references our Blu-ray because we did that. So that's kind of my process for building my subquery. So whenever you need to do a subquery, jump in a terminal, run the select statement, get your subquery built, and then what I could do is I could just take, right click, copy this, and then we could paste it in here, something like this, where I would say insert into item, because you're actually going to do an insert into item. So this is actually a good thing. And then I would say blah, blah, blah. Let's just say that we have item type. There's the rest of them. And then our values. And then I would put blah, blah, blah. And then I would build my subquery like that. And you can format it however you want. There's a lot of different ways. Then you can just paste that in there, take away the semicolon, and you're good. Does that make sense to everybody? Everyone got subqueries down? For the most part, you'll only really have to subquery common lookup in this lab. Yep. Oh, there will be one other subquery when you do your insert into rental. When you do your insert into rental, you'll want to put, because we do all of our inserts into the Potter stuff. So when we do our insert into rental, we need to have our customer ID, which points to our person. So, and I just looked it up. Customer ID refers to contact ID. So we're going to insert into rental, and we would say something like this. We would say rental s1.nextval, and then we would say our subquery is to get Potter, right? We want to get Harry Potter. So what I would do is I'd say select everything from contact where last name is equal to Harry and first name is equal to Potter. Oh, and I get no rows selected. And that's because last name of Harry and first name of Potter isn't going to work very well. So let's fix that. And there we go. We get Harry Potter. And one row. That's the important thing, is one row only. So then we know that our query is good. We're getting our one row. We make sure it has the data there, but really we only need contact ID. So we get that. And the reason we do this is, let's say that Harry Potter's contact ID suddenly changed to 1015. Well, it doesn't matter, because even if this changed to 1015, we're still going to get a value that finds Harry Potter. Now, most of the time we wouldn't want to use just a last name, first name, but it works here. So then we paste our subquery in here, take away the semicolon, wrap it in parentheses, and we could move on. And for formatting purposes, I'm going to do this. That's usually how I do mine. If you want it even cleaner and easier to read, I know a lot of people do this. Something like that. It's up to you. I'm more of a condensed kind of a person, so I kind of like to do it like that. All right. And our checkout date. So real quick, while we're here, so like for Harry, because Harry was going to do a 1-day rental, right? So we would put his items would go in above this. You'd insert into rental item with the movie, or we do our insert into rental, then we would do our inserts into rental item. And so when we do our where is our rental? When we do our insert into rental, we want to make sure that we do it for the right time. So let's look here. What is our, so we have that, then we have our, so we got rental ID, we got customer ID. So we have checkout date and return date. So our checkout date, what we want it to be is we want that to be today, essentially. So we're going to say trunk sys date. And that will be the checkout date. The return date, now this is the important one, where we get to specify how many days it is between them. So in this case, Harry Potter's renting it for 1 day. So tomorrow he's going to have to return that movie. So there's that. And then our who audit columns, we can just do one sys date, one sys date. The who audit columns are the only ones where I would say it's okay to just put a hard-coded value. The only thing is you want to make sure you have that value. I get a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, in the video you put a 1 for uh, created by and last updated by, and that's not working for me. Well, if it's not working for you, you need to make sure that your database has it, because mine might be different, and that's okay. So you select distinct system user ID from system user. And this will give you a list of values that you can use. For example, you'll notice mine is 1 through 4. Yours will be quite different because yours will go from 1 to 3, I think, and then it'll actually switch to thousands maybe. Or it might just be, 1. But anyways, as long as you have the number that's in here, you'll be good. So I like to use 1 because I can just put it in there. And that will insert Harry Potter's rental. Now, let's say that Harry Potter, or now I'm doing Ginny Potter, and this is what's nice. Watch how easy this is to change this to Ginny. Oh, Ginny's done, right? So I don't even have to go look up a number. I can just change her name. Oh, and I should probably change it in the right places. Of course. That's why you always check your subqueries. In fact, let's check our subquery here. Let's take and run it. So we're going to just paste this in here. Add a semicolon. We get one row only, so we know we're good. And that's all we need to change that. We just change her first name. Now, she has to rent a movie for 3 days, right? She has to rent a movie for 3 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sysdate plus 3. So she won't have to turn that movie in till 3 days from now. And then I believe Lily does one for 5 days. So, pretty easy to do that with the dates. All right, let's move on. Or I guess, does that make sense to everybody? Everyone good with that? And I believe that there is this right here. Oh, and that's the txt. Rental inserts.sql. So there's the SQL file in your lib1 folder. Let's see, it just does rental though. So this doesn't chain them. So this isn't the best example. So why don't we do that real quick? Let's go over this. So let's switch this back to Harry because he's the first one. Just a 1-day rental. So we're going to do our insert into rental. And then what we would do is we would do insert into rental item. All right, so we'd say insert into rental item. And we're going to not cover all this, but let's just make sure we have some of our columns right here. So we have our table definition over there. So we're going to say rental item s1 dot next val because that's our primary key. So that'll get the next one. But then our rental ID, we want to say rental s1 dot curval because we just incremented it right here. So if we use the curval, this movie is going to be tied to this rental. Then we have our item ID. Now this is where we're going to have to build a subquery. So I'm just going to put this here and let you guys write your subquery because that's where you will write the subquery to find your movie. And in the case of Harry Potter, he's renting one new one. This will be a subquery to one of the new movies that you put in. Then we have our created by, creation date, last updated by, last update date. Because you'll notice that I don't list my columns here, right? If I did this and did like rental item ID and rental ID, I could put these in whatever order these are in. But I'm not going to do that for right now. Instead, I'm just going to put values. But that means that I have to go in whatever order they're listed here. And you remember how we added those 2 columns at the beginning of this lab? Well, now our who audit columns created by, last updated by, and all that kind of stuff isn't at the end anymore. Now we have rental item per type and rental item price. So what we're going to do is we are going to do this. So we are going to do one sysdate, one and sysdate. And then for those last two, we're just going to put null and null. Right? So that's one way. And now let's do our second one. Item. And let's do this one the other way. So we're actually going to list out the column name. So we're going to say rental item ID, rental ID, and then we're going to do item ID created by So I'm going to only put these ones, all right? And I'm going to erase those two. Now, question, pop quiz, would this work? I don't know why it's indenting all weird. Yes. And the reason this would work is because rental item type and rental item price are unconstrained columns. They're null. In fact, all the existing values in there are null because we haven't put anything in there. We haven't constrained them. So by not listing them up here, we're not going to put a value in there. And so the database just, accepts that those are going to be null. So if you list out all the column names, you don't have to put those nulls in there. If you do list them out, or if you don't list them out, it expects a value for every column. And so in order, it expects a value for every column in order. So you have to put those nulls there. So a lot of times I just list them out. And in fact, in preparation, this is where we venture off just a little bit, but I would highly recommend that you prepare for posts. If you have any desire to do this professionally, or if you have any desire to do this like on your own, I would get ready for Postgres. And Postgres, basically, while you can do it this way, basically they build it with the assumption that you should always list the column names on your inserts. Because they don't let you move columns like ordering and stuff like that. They always expect you to just list out the columns you want to insert into. So I would say it is good habit to do this right here. And the other thing that I kind of like about it is it does help your brain see like, okay, rental item ID, because I can go through, put all the columns that I'm inserting into, and then I can match them up visually a lot easier. Right? So, and most of the time, unless I'm really trying to save room, I actually, even though it's not quite as compact, I like to keep all the values on separate lines. That way it does match up, because, there's a lot of times it'll say, oh, you have more columns listed than values. I guarantee someone comes across that at some point. And so for me, it's really easy to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, is something going on here? I don't know. Maybe I counted wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm good. And stuff like that. So that's what I would do. So anyways, we have our rental items. And then what you can do is you can just take and copy this just like you did before. And then we are going to do it for Ginny. And then you just have to change your subquery here for the name. We're going to change our days that is rented. And then you'll change your subquery to get a different movie. And I can't remember if she had 1 or 2, but if she only has 1, you can just delete one of the movies out and move along. All right. Do we need to make the return dates for specific types of rental, like new for 1 day or old for 3 days? No. So the new and the old actually comes from the item table. So if I describe item, what makes it a new or an old day thing is actually based on the release date of the movie. So if you guys remember back to the old Blockbuster days, they had like the new release shelf, and those actually cost more. And so like I remember, in when I was a young lad, my mom would always say, "Oh, you can go and you can pick one new movie and two old movies," and so we'd always rent them on Saturday because you could do a 1 day rental and keep them over the weekend because you didn't have to turn them back till Monday. So we'd get one new movie and two old movies, and make a weekend out of it pretty much. And so where that old new type stuff comes from is actually from the release date. So how you determine that is when we're doing our inserts into Harry Potter, this subquery here will get a new movie, and this subquery will get an old movie. And the way you can do that is actually just write the subquery to pull a specific movie. So like if it were me, I would say select everything from item where item title is equal to hunt for, and I don't remember if that's capitalized or not. And if you don't know, you can always just select everything. That's what's nice. And then I can say hunt for the Red October. And was it capitalized? The hunt for Red October. And was it item title? Sorry, I am like short-term memory today. The hunt for Red October. And there we go. So I would do something like this. There's my thing. Make sure it only pulls one row. And then I would change this to item ID. Now, if you really, this should work. If we were really wanting to go future proof, and I'm going to say this just so I can say that I did my due diligence, usually what I would do here is because let's say we had a Blu-ray and a, a, a DVD of Hunt for the Red October. And maybe we charge different prices for those. So it's really important that we specify which one, not only because it would actually fail, because we would get two. So the more exhaustive you can be, the better. But I would do a subquery like this. I would say select, and for the most part, and we can look at the item type too. So let's delete this real quick because we got to see what that item type is. And I'm going to guess it's just a plain old DVD. And remember that item type points to common lookup. So we're going to say select everything from common lookup, where common lookup type is equal to 1011. Oh, and what did I do? Select everything from common lookup where select everything from common lookup where common lookup type is equal to 1011. Okay, that is weird. Does anyone see what I'm missing there? Okay, I think that's some sort of weird bug because that is well, that's weird. Oh, I know what it is. So common lookup type, I don't want to look up common lookup type. I want to look up common lookup ID. Yeah, there you go. Yep. I was trying to query, I was trying to see if 1001 was equal to a character string, which it's going to fail at. So let's try that again, but with our 1011. And there we go, DVD widescreen. So, you know, we could put that in there to where we're like select item ID from item where, but we're going to do a join. So we're going to say from item. Let's get this done first. Let's do select. Why is it indenting weird? There we go. Where item title is equal to the hunt for red October. So let's run this, make sure it goes. And again, I'm just showing this because this is kind of how I do mine. You know, okay, yep, we got it. So now let's add our join. So we're going to change this item I. So I dot item ID, I dot item title. We're going to inner join that with common lookup. We're going to call it CL on I dot item type is equal to CL dot common lookup ID, right? Because as we just saw, that's kind of what the number is referring to is common lookup ID. So that's how we match. And then once we do that, then we can add and I or CL dot. Now I can use common lookup type is equal to DVD underscore wide underscore screen. And for right now, I'm going to actually select everything so we can see it. Actually, no, let's do this. Let's go I dot item title and CL dot common lookup. And let's get the meaning because we kind of want to see like the pretty way of describing it. And let's make sure this works. And there we go. We get Hunt for the Red October, DVD widescreen, so we know everything's working right. So then I'm just going to change this so where it only pulls the item ID because we only need one value. And then we paste this in here to make sure it works. And we get our 1. So this is the kind of subquery that I might use to put for my old movie, right? Because Hunt for the Red October, if we look at its, we have it up here. If we look at its release date, holy cow, it's way up here. Hunt for the Red October, its release date was on the 2nd of March, 1990. So it is definitely not a new movie. So we are going to put that in our old movie one for Harry. Just like that, take away our semicolon, and that should work. And for our new movie, we would do the same thing, but just replace the title and maybe the type with whatever movie you inserted and whatever type you inserted, because you get to choose the type when you insert it. So like I said, I would just use Blu-ray, in which case you could do that. Now, there's always going to be someone who says, this isn't pulling anything. Well, check to make sure your spelling matches what's in the column that you're referring to. Because those dang underscores can get tricky. They have to be case sensitive, so you got to make sure it all matches. All right, and we are moving right along. Is everyone good with that? Inserting the rental and then the rental items. What's nice is you'll come right after doing your member contact and all that stuff. So you'll just be in an inserting mood, and I think it'll actually make pretty good sense. And the nice thing is these subqueries give you a nice opportunity to kind of practice with your queries a little bit, because this is a little bit more real, you know, than a lot of things that we did in Lab 5, because we're still only pulling a number, but you know, it's applied. You know, because you're saying, I want to make sure I get the item ID for Hunt for the Red October, and specifically the DVD widescreen, because maybe we have a Blu-ray of Hunt for the Red October, which would be awesome, because that's one of my favorite movies. All right, so let's continue on. Let's take a look at step 4. So step 4, we're going to kind of do a major overhaul of common lookup. So what we're going to do here is we're going to rename our old bad columns, because you'll notice that you get real sick of typing common lookup context, and we're going to add a new column that makes things a lot easier to make sure we're filtering down to correct data. So we're going to modify the design and then make the necessary changes to make it work, because we are going to have to change a few things. So step 1 is we are going to drop the common lookup indexes, some of these indexes. And that's pretty easy. Again, you can Google search it if you need to. You just say drop index and then the name of the index. It's quite simple. All right. And then instruction details. Okay, here we go. And this is kind of giving you some hints, which we'll talk about. Okay, so drop the, and I would recommend reading this because it actually is quite useful, especially if you forget what we talk about here. So we're going to drop these indexes. Then we're going to add 3 new columns to the common lookup tables. So we're going to add 3 new columns, which we should know how to do because we did it first step of the lab. Add columns. Should be able to do it all in one go too. And the columns, you can use the same, let's see, where does it say? It should say what the column data types are. Right here. So the common lookup table is a varchar. They're all varchar 230s. So there's your data types. You can just plop those in there. There's not going to be any constraints on them yet because, and another pop quiz, why can't we put a constraint on our new columns? Be brave. I have faith in you all. No data yet. That's right, because there's already data in the columns. We have existing rows. And when we add a new column, that row, like any table, that column exists for all the rows in the table, and they will all be empty upon initialization. So we cannot put a constraint on there because, well, we would be breaking our constraint the minute the column is created. So we add our new columns, varchar 230s. Now this is where we get to have some fun. So we created our new columns that are actually going to replace some of ours, but we can't just, we're not just renaming the columns because we're kind of going to do something a little tricky here. So we actually create our new columns and then we're going to migrate the data to it. So kind of like what was previously asked with your renaming columns and stuff like that. A lot of times, because the whole point of the database is the data itself, we go through a lot of hoops to make sure we have data retention. And so sometimes it's best to duplicate the data momentarily. And in a lot of cases, that's exactly what production systems do. So often when production systems are getting ready to implement something new or a change, they actually create the new columns at the same time the old ones are there, because then that way they can test everything, make sure it's all working, and they might even leave that in after they cut everything over. They might leave that for about 3 or 4 release cycles to make sure that it's all working correctly before they drop those columns, because they don't want to risk losing the data. In fact, in a lot of cases, they actually never drop the old columns because they don't want to lose that data. And it's not going to hurt anything, because for the most part, people using software don't actually see what's behind the curtain, so to speak. So let's migrate our data. So we have our new columns. So the first thing we're going to want to do, and it says it is possible to make these changes one at a time, as the instructions explain. It's also possible to make multiple changes in a single query. I'm going to say do them one at a time unless you feel like challenging yourself, but I would say do them one at a time. Now, this is going to walk you through step by step, just kind of like a lot of the other stuff, exactly how to write this query. You just have to read the instructions very carefully, and hopefully after seeing one or two of them, it makes a little sense. So the first one, it'll say detail verification. This is the verification scripts. It'll show you how to test. But the first one is we're going to update common lookup table with the value of common lookup context column. So know that I'm looking at this over on my other screen. And let me unlock this guy here again. So we are going to migrate our data. So I'm going to read this as I write it. So we are going to update, keyword there, the common lookup table column. Now, inferred, we're editing common lookup table. So we say update table name, and we're going to update the common lookup table. So we say set common lookup table. And then it says when the common lookup context, so we're going to say when, not when, we're going to say where common lookup context columns value is not equal to a value of multiple. So in this case, we're going to say not equal to a value of multiple. Okay. Oh, and I missed something. It says update the common lookup table column with the value of common lookup context. So let's look at this. Common lookup context. Where the common lookup context does not equal multiple. So real quick, I am going to clean up mine so we can look at this. So if I did a describe, if I did select everything from common, holy cow, I'm struggling typing, from common lookup, what we're doing, oh yeah, common lookup. We are going to put common lookup table equal to the value of common lookup context, where common lookup context does not equal multiple. So if I'm the computer, I'm going to roll through this, right? And I'm going to say, okay, we're altering common lookup. Okay, here's common lookup. And I'm going to then run the where clause. So where common lookup context does not equal multiple. Okay, so let's really what it's doing on the back end is this. And you'll notice that as soon as I run this, our two lines that had multiple are now gone. So now for every row here in the results set, it's going to take and change the common lookup table value equal to common lookup context. So real quick, let's just do this. Let's say alter common lookup, add column. Oh, and what did I do here? Guess I should say alter table. Did I spell column right? Alter. Oh, I don't think I have to put column. There we go. All right, so now when we run this again, let's run our select everything from common lookup where it doesn't equal multiple. The computer's going to go through here, and for every row here, it's going to say, okay, take common lookup context and place it over here. So let's actually run this and see what we get. And you'll notice that we get 15 rows updated, but it's always good to check because it can say that rows were updated without actually changing anything. So I'm going to take out our where clause and see what we got. So let's select everything from common lookup. And now you'll notice that we copied our data over to common lookup table, except for where it's multiple. So then if we go back here, so that's kind of how you can read that, right? So it'll be just like that for the most part. Now here's where we deal with that multiple. So our next one says we are going to update the common lookup table column with the value of hard-coded address. So we're going to take this, and if I were you, I would just take and copy that one, and we are going to change this to address. And then instead of saying does not equal to, we're going to say equal to. So then I could run this, unless we get 2 rows updated. Now if I select everything, you'll notice that everything's copied over. But can anyone tell me what 2 rows used this home and work? There prior, because that's why I said multiple, there was 2 tables. Telephone and address, perfect. So now basically what we did is instead of saying delete it and start over, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this one for address, but we're going to add 2 new ones for telephone. So then it says create common lookup column values based on references. So we're going to copy the common lookup column values. And basically what we do is we take the table name and add an underscore type string to it. So that one's pretty easy. And to see how we do that one real quick, because this one will get all of them. So we're going to say update common lookup. And rather than do this for you, I'm just going to show you what I would do. So if I was going to set common lookup column is equal to, and then I would say common lookup context. Because if I want to add underscore type to that, I would do something like this. Right, and I guess there may or may not be a semicolon there. But what this is going to do is it's going to add underscore type to it. So for example, if I did select common lookup context from common lookup, I get that. Then if I do select common lookup context pipe type, notice it just appends the string on the end. Now, one thing you'll notice in the instructions is that it says that we're supposed to do this based on common lookup context. Now, there is a little shortcut here because this has you do an update statement. So this would have you do all that, and then you would update address, because you'll notice if we just ran that, we would get multiple type instead of address type. Well, we already did all this work to move stuff over to the common lookup table, right? Because common lookup table is all filled. If we want to skip this step here, where we update the address ones, you can just run this all in one go right there. And instead of using common lookup context, use common lookup table. And then, because that one's already address, we already changed it to address. So you can just do this and we get all of the proper stuff. All right. And then there should be one more. Does that make sense to everybody? How we copy all that over? Okay, perfect. And then, so here's where most people kind of get hung up with all this is like Marie said, is telephone and address used to rely on um, that multiple home and work. Well, we just changed that to address. So if I were to try to look up what telephone type um, people are, what type would it, what would it refer to? What would be the common lookup table if I were what would be the common lookup table? Yep, address. Sorry. I'm like just struggling trying to find the words, but you guys are reading my mind. So it would refer to address, which is what we don't want. And so what we're going to do is we're going to insert two new tables for telephone, or two new tables. We're going to insert two new rows for telephone, homework, just like we had for address. So those are just two inserts, right there. You just got to put the values in. But then what we have to do is we have to update our telephone table so that it refers to the correct one. So what I would do is something like this. I would say update telephone, set telephone type equal to, and then I would build a subquery to get telephone and home, right? Because it's going to actually take two of these. So it's going to say telephone, the one that's home, where telephone type is equal to, and then you could put a subquery to get address home. Does that make sense to everybody? Let me do this just in case anyone's confused. Right, I'm kind of writing some like pseudo code right now. And then we would want to do the ones for work. If I were the one doing this, I probably would have done mobile and home, because I don't know why a movie rental really cares for a work phone number. But yeah, you can make the assumption that home is like a home line and then work might be a mobile. Okay, I guess because we've actually got a few minutes, because it's pretty much like some of the last steps here. So does someone in chat real quick want to write a subquery to get the telephone home from common lookup real quick? Someone want to give it a shot? And then if someone else wants to, and when you're volunteering, call it out. If someone else wants to write one to get telephone work from common lookup, and they should be fairly similar, but if someone wants to give a shot and shoot it out there so I'm not waiting forever. So if you want to give it a shot, go ahead. Okay, so we get one that says select telephone home from common lookup. So, and I guess I should clarify, I was writing pseudocode. So when we do our select statement, remember that those are the column names. So when I do that, it says invalid identifier. So what we need to do is we need to select, really what we're going to do is we're going to select the common lookup ID. But for right now, let's select everything from common lookup. Now what we want to do is we want to filter this. So really you just have to write a where clause, and it might take two. In fact, it's going to take a where and an and, because we want to filter this down to where we get telephone and home. So I guess I should clarify, when I say telephone home, we're referring to the data in here. Does anyone want to have another go at writing that? Because there's the first part. Select everything from common lookup. let's do this. What would I put, what column would I say here? If I was trying to find the telephone table, what column would I put here? Now, I don't have the telephone table in here yet, but it's going to. In fact, let's just run lab 6 real quick. Then you'll see it like you were there. Okay, what would I put? Okay, so here we go. Select common lookup type from common lookup where common lookup table is equal to address and common lookup type is equal to home. So yeah, that would be perfect for this one right here with one exception. So I'm going to take and copy this actually, and we're going to run this. So now if I paste this in here, this actually should, well, it would run if Zoom used the correct stuff here. You know, Unicode, UTF-8, all that fun jazz. Oh, and I guess, again, let's change this here. All right, so you'll notice that we get home here, which is great. However, if we do select everything from telephone type, select everything from telephone, where telephone type is equal to, because remember, this is going to return whatever this value is. And maybe you meant it just to make it easy to read, but if we were essentially testing it, it would return home. And you'll notice that I get an error because it's expecting a number. So really this is perfect, but what we'd want to change is one thing is that instead of selecting the type here, we would want to select the common lookup ID because that's the primary key that we are referring to. But everything else was perfect. So something like this is perfect for what we would put right. Remember, this is the address one, so we'd put this right here. Minus a semicolon. And then what we would do to change this for telephone, because remember, now we have our telephone type right here. We have a telephone for home and a telephone for work, and that's what we want to change it to, right? Because currently our telephones are referring to 1008 and 1009. Well, we want it to refer to 1016 and 1017. But we don't want to hard code those, so we use these subqueries. So if we wanted to change it, all we have to do is change the table name right there. Something like that. And then you're going to do the same thing. And what's nice is you can kind of just take and copy this and use it down here, and you only have to change one value to make it work for work. Great job. Does that make sense to everybody? Is anyone confused by all that? Okay, we get it. One yes. We got 2 yeses. Perfect. Okay, and that was step A down here. This last step requires you update the correct one. And what do you know? It's actually pretty much right here. So it gives you a select statement. So, but anyways, you have a better example now. And yeah, that's it. That's the lab. So we actually went through it in pretty good detail. It shouldn't be too terrible. Most of the tricky steps we covered, so for the most part. Now, I hopefully gave you guys enough tidbits that there's examples around. So even if you have to kind of like, use one example somewhere else, you've pretty much almost seen an example of every piece to this. With the exception of like create table stuff, which we covered pretty thoroughly earlier. But that create table will be a good exercise in writing one from scratch, which will be quite fun. So anyways, does anyone else have any questions before we call her good? If you do, type one character in the chat just so I know while you're typing your question. It's looking good, looking pretty quiet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Well, anyways, yeah, good luck this week on Lab 6. It should be pretty simple.